Near mint condition, the home of collected editions. Oh my gosh, look at that panel of Batman. You have the Absolute, you have the Deluxe. DC Comics firing on all cylinders.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Near Mint Condition. Today we're going to be taking a first look at the brand new editions of the first 29 issues of the two collected editions of the Authority from the WILDSTORM imprint. Let's go ahead and do this. Hello everybody, I am Dom of X, Near Mint Condition Manager. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Authority trade paperbacks, books 1 and 2. These are the brand new editions. We have a lot to discuss and dive into the world that Brian Hitch and Warren Ellis created. But before we go ahead and take a look inside of the book, I want to do a look in on the spine, the front, and the back to see how these brand new editions are looking at. The first thing that we will notice in terms of both of these books, if you may, the hue on the Authority logo are both different. Here on the left-hand side, you have a lighter, more goldish hue, while on the right-hand side, you do have the hue looking more orange. And that also goes the same for books 1 and book 2. On the left-hand side, you will also see that the DC logo is still the previous timeless logo that they introduced in the pages of DC Rebirth. On the right-hand side, however, you will see that we do not only just have the brand new DC Bullet logo or the refurnishing of it, but that this is white and that they are also adding the black label logo onto it too. Like I said earlier, you have the hues of the Authority logos matching the book 1s and the book 2. In retrospect, of course, on the left-hand side, you do have a cover by the now over at Ghost Machine creator of the Authority, co-creator Brian Hitch, with inker Paul Neary and Laura Martin on colors. By far my favorite colorist, I think, maybe ever. And on the right-hand side, we do have a cover by Arthur Adams, who penciled the last 3 issues of the Authority with Mark Miller as he finished it off with Brave New World, and Frank quietly just could not hit the deadlines. But I would have loved to see a Frank quietly cover on this instead of Arthur Adams. No shade to Arthur, Bay Area legend, but I would prefer it if they had the main artist on. But again, that's just me, featuring the engineer and the other Authority members of Mark Miller's team. Here's a look at how it will look like on your bookshelf. If I zoom out just a tad bit, you can see on the left-hand side that it is a little bit taller than the one on the right-hand side, and that is partly because of the differences in the printer. This was printed in Missouri, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later, along with how many times the book has gone out of print subsequently. And then on the right-hand side, the book is printed off where most of, if not almost all of the DC books are printed off on, and that is over at the Salisco printers in Canada. So you do have a little bit of a height difference. This will matter, I think, to some people who are looking into purchasing 1 or 2. If you are a big complete collection or epic collection or DC finest collector, as someone who prefers trade paperbacks and wants the full story, both of these do present the full story of both of these respective creators. You will have, I think, a little bit of an issue in terms of the height. Maybe your K-Lax, not your K-Lax, but your Billy or whatever shelf that you prefer. Maybe the trim size is just a trade paperback. So that is just one thing to notice in the differences of height. I have not altered anything. This is just as level. We also have on the bottom here, no black label for the bottom logo of this specific DC collection of the Authority, but we do have the DC Bullet logo and then the DC Rebirth logo branded here appropriately as on the spine. Yet, funnily enough, these do have the same synopsis or main synopsis on the back with roughly the same graphic design and the same layout. You have the synopsis featured in bold yellow, along with a quick summary of the synopsis and the stories that are presented in here in books 1 through 2 of the Authority. I would also like to I can't help but notice, and I'm gonna, before we get into it, I do want to mention that the book 2 is a little bit thicker than book 1 in terms of the looks and the pages or the material that they use for the printing of these books. So let's go ahead and dive into the Authority. All right, let's go ahead and talk about book 1 of the Authority, and also something I've just noticed with this subsequent printing and also trend patterns in the printing of this specific book. The Authority book 1 is, of course, all illustrated, at least for the main portion of the book, by Brian Hitch, with Phil Jimenez on the interior for the Planetary and Authority crossover, which I actually had a lot of fun with. And of course, all the stellar covers by Brian Hitch, with an introduction by Grant Morrison. Here on the main front, you'll have all of the creators listed, along with the creators for the Planetary, who are, of course, the late legendary John Cassaday and Warren Ellis as well. And then on the left-hand side, you do have all of the copyrighted material information, editorial information, and again, this was printed in Missouri by, I should say, LSC Communications in Owensville. So this, the material in this, very much different than the DC Finest we've been getting, and along with the Authority book 2, which feels a lot like the DC Finest, but this is book 1, so let's go ahead and talk about it. I remember when I first read this in 2018, 2019, when I just started sort of venturing off into, wait, there are more creators and characters than the big 2 have to offer, or DC has to offer, because I was a DC kid growing up and at the time. And I had read the Midnighter series by Steve Orlando, and I really, really enjoyed it. And I had no idea who the heck Midnighter was or what they were about. I just knew that, hey, this is a pretty cool guy. He fights like Batman. He kind of looks like Batman, but he's not Batman. So I ventured out, and a buddy of mine in Malaysia, one of my best friends, told me, you need to read The Authority. And so I strapped on my boots and said, I need to go to my library, pick up book 1 or whatever traits they had of the Authority, and I was blown away. This was, in my opinion, the template for the modern superhero story. There are so many pages here that when I think of the biggest superhero epics that have mimicked this in terms of its style, in terms of the dominance of the themes, and in terms of challenging what a modern superhero book or a regular superhero book looks like, look no further place than The Authority by Brian Ellis, or by Warren Ellis and Brian Hitch. This is comics and storytelling at its peak. When you can tell a multi-layered drama with a fascinating and sometimes very, very heart-pulled story. This is the birth. This is really where the book, when I think of, when we get down to, this is how we tell stories nowadays. You have the status quo of Stormwatch, right? Which just recently got destroyed, and in a world where suddenly cities are being blown apart, and we are 2 cities away from utter chaos and destruction, from this dictator from this island called Gamora. What better way to do it than to recruit and get 7 different superpowered beings, might not consider them superheroes, may perhaps, and fight this terrorist and get down to the nit and the grittiness of what you are expecting in terms of a last-minute fight. This is the Authority. This is every single one of your viewpoints being challenged by these superpowered beings who might or might not be the people that you might seek out to be. And I can't think of any better way to explain it than for me to say I really, really love these specific characters. Not only with Midnighter and Apollo, who are this version of Batman and Superman. This is one of my... Jenny Sparks is one of my favorite characters, I think, ever in fiction. I love the way that her story really, or her character really captures this person who has lived on this earth for long enough and is completely distraught at the thought of leading a superhero team. And I really like one of the conversations too, where she is just over in her head and says, like, maybe this whole leading thing isn't for me. But you really get to see her grow into this leadership role, and also coordinate with the Doctor, who just has some of the coolest magical powers. Very much, it feels like to me anyways, a Dr. Fate one-on-one, or somebody that can dominate the magic space. The Engineer, who I also just happen to love her design, and I also can't help but think, man, did John Cassaday take those elements and when he made Danger, did that go into the fold and the mix there? And I can't think of anybody well enough to also capture the atmosphere in this book other than Brian Hitch. Brian Hitch had worked on a lot of 90s books, but was on and off on plenty of the works that he was given. And it wasn't until this book that he really got his shine. I want to, again, reference my buddy over in Malaysia who showed me some of his artistic techniques and some of the minutia and the dictionary words, if you will, on the process and how he was able to make the modern superhero art panel come to life. Every single one of these pages feels heavy, it feels big, it's grand, but there's never any moments where I'm like, man, this should have just been a spread book, this should have just been an art book, this should have just been, can you remove all the dialogue in it? But the close-ups, the heaviness, the drama, the effects that he uses, when you see some of these panels where it is either completely widescreen, and right, that's the term that people like to use, the widescreen. Hitch is very much known for not using any vertical panels in his titles or in this specific book of Authority. There is always a sense of you understanding and you sitting down, this is what it feels like to make a movie in the big screen. So much so that I think Phil Jimenez went, hey, I can also do what Brian is doing. And of course, it's something I learned from another Hitch book that Jonathan Hickman wrote, which was from the Ultimate Invasion miniseries. Good artist copy, but great artist steal, and it's really hard to say that didn't have an immediate effect on people who were coming into the industry. It's really hard now, I think, in any circumstance to see somebody not do a spread page. But because of Brian, we have pages that fold over into this, not overtly long, but in this horizontal format that he loves using in all of these books. So when I kid you not, like when I first turned those pages over to see the attacks on Moscow and the way that the Authority were represented in this book, oh my goodness, I kid you not, I was shook to the ground. I just wanted to see every single bit in detail into what Brian was doing. And of course, he'd bring that over to the Ultimates and more recently in books like Hawkman and also Redcoat. So this has been a defining trait of Brian Hitch's, and he is so wonderfully complemented by Paul Neary on inks, and Laura Martin on colors. Let me just tell you, I don't think I've ever seen anybody understand the power of modern lighting as well as Laura Martin does. I really, really, really liked what she did on books like Thor, Wonder Woman. But to say that the atmosphere that she brings doesn't capture the moment, man, I think is just underselling it. Like, it is a mastery of the craft of not only creating something brand new, but refreshing it so that when we get every single page, you feel wowed at the moment. It feels bigger, but yet at the same time, you're so intimately connected with all of the characters and their stories, and some of the characters that we have to say goodbye to. These are split into 4-part stories, each issue being a singular part of this greater 12-issue narrative. And unfortunately, we have to say goodbye to somebody that we have grown very, very close to in this series, that I had grown very close to in this series, and learning about who they are and really their growth over the 12 issues of the Authority. And it comes to me just as a shock to see how everything goes down, because you never want to see them go. But unfortunately, it is what it is, and that is what we are left with in terms of that specific character. And not only that, the way that the Carrier is drawn, the Carrier obviously being powered by the Earth, which I think is super cool. But not only that, I mean, just the way that the details are intricately drawn. I have no idea how Bryan Hitch was able to do all these 12 issues in the series. I was surprised when I saw that there weren't like any fill-ins or anybody getting in the way. So a shout out to everybody who worked on this book in making something of a modern masterpiece. Now, I can't think of it. Like, I really, really want to do at some point maybe a comparison between Jonathan Hickman's first arc of New Avengers from issues 1 through 3 and compare it with the Authority, because they gape each other in so many different ways. It really does feel like a lot of the bigger superhero stories are very much not pure adaptations, but they really do feel like the heartened sequels to The Authority by Bryan Hitch and Warren Ellis. And here are the extras in the back. We do have the Relentless trade paperback cover, along with the first printing of the Authority Absolute, which, of course, this book was taken off of. And I'll bleed this, and you can see the script there, if I can continue to move over. And I really like the way that they thought about how do we put this symbol in for the people that you will be seeing in this book, or that the Authority are going up against. And it is, I love the subtlety in this book too. It just speaks wonders to how well designed this specific book was and was made. And they also include some other different variant covers by Bryan Hitch, and more so on the extras, another spread page, and how this book was made in the process. An unpublished piece. Maybe they'll publish it someday. Maybe we get an Absolute Authority Volume 1, or the biographies. So that is it for Volume 1. Now let's go ahead and take a look at Book 2 of The Authority, this time by Mark Millar and Frank Quitely. I always try saying Mark Millar. I know that it's pronounced, or technically pronounced, Miller, but Millar said on their Twitter a couple of years ago that it didn't really matter which pronunciation, like both of them were technically correct. On top of that, people, when I say writers, I usually tend to say last names for creators, and Frank and Mark have the phonetic same last name, so I don't like getting those two mixed up, but that is a different story for a different time. Let's look at the insides of Book 2. Here you can see all of the different creators on here, and there are a lot more because not everything here is done by Mark Millar. You have writing, and here we go. There is another introduction, so it is basically the same structure as the previous volume. On the left-hand side, you do have the editorial team, along with the printing information and the copyrighted material information, all of that goody stuff. And on the right-hand side, you do have the introduction by Tim Miller. who is talking about the realistic takeover that Mark has had on this specific book. Before I get into it, I just want to talk about some other things briefly in terms of the context of this book and also the previous one. Book 1 went out of print. I remember back when the entire slate of brand new DC movies were announced under the tutelage of James Gunn. The Authority was one of them. And most people, when they reference or think about the Authority, they don't think about the 16 issues that came after Warren Ellis and Brian Hitch were on, right? They often talk about the first 12 issues that Brian Hitch drew and that Warren Ellis wrote. So believe my shock when I said, hey, there's so many book 2s partly still out there, but they tend to go out from time to time. So here I am flipping through the pages of book 2 of The Authority by Mark Millar, and there are going to be some minor spoilers in this, so please be aware. If you have not read this series yet, I would advise you to check out this series for your own and come back later at some point. So in this series, we have an arc called The Nativity, and in this arc, we are dealing with the Authority having to deal with the fallout of Jenny Sparks passing away in the last pages of Warren Ellis's Authority. And it is partly unfortunate because, like I mentioned earlier, Jenny Sparks was one of my favorite characters from the book, if not my favorite personal character. I really like the way that she led a team. And obviously, when you get to the bits and pieces of it, how are you going to lead a team without the person that got you through all of that? Well, here comes none other than Jack Hawksmoor, who reveals to the team at some point that Jenny Sparks actually might be out there and might be closer than we even mentioned. I found that really interesting because literally at the 21st century mark, we do get Jenny Sparks to quote-unquote pass away, but somehow they have found her remains somewhere in the midst of the Pacific Ocean. But also in this, one thing that Mark Millar, as plenty of his side stuff tends to do, is he likes to deal with historical outcomes and also the ancient artifacts. We saw that a little bit in the first volume of The Authority, where the characters that we are introduced to in the second arc of The Authority, they are not by circumstance, but they are indeed aliens. We find out that some of them have been around the Earth since the Renaissance period, and right before we head into the Baroque era of music. So you have interesting points there. We also find out that they are also breeding with humans. Like there are alien human breeds that are happening on the planet Earth. Mark Millar tends to or has taken a bit of a step in this point. So what he does is he takes those aspects, the intertwining of real human history with the WILDSTORM universe, and he wants to mix it with his own. In that fact, we find out that there has been this doctor who has been sort of dealing with the underlying masterminds behind some of the projects around the United States government, which is something that they heavily focus on for a lot of Millar's arcs in the book, and that is none other than this doctor who is Dr. Jacob Kriegstein, who is, yes, behind this brand new world order that has been seemingly set up in the midst of the death of Jenny Sparks. And we also get to see how the Authority deal with actual authority in the world as of today. You get to see them talk with the president or somebody that they clearly might not care for the president, because they also want to do jurisdiction on their own terms, not just through a world government or the United Nations, but something that is more akin to their dealings out in the world. So there is a midst of conflict in between the team and how they want to operate, because again, Jenny Sparks is dead, but there's also conflict outside of the world in seeing, wait, can we actually do things the way that we do in the heat and mix of the flurry? I apologize for the book dropping, but in the world and the flurry just around the uncertainty of everything. And it's odd because I usually do not say that about these books, but I actually found the first arc to be quite revealing, and also there is a twist at the end. Millar tends to do them, at least sometimes for me, decently, and I actually did not mind this twist. Now, I want people to keep in mind when they do read these books, or this book in specifically, there is an uppage in shock value. I mentioned earlier that Millar wanted, I think, to do two things in primarily with this book, which was to not only retroactively fit the Authority to mix in with the rest of the world and its whole entire state of structure, but Millar also ups the shock value of the book. And by up the shock value, I mean, I really... To actually scale this back, no pun intended. In the first Authority book, I always thought that whenever something big happened, it wasn't just primarily to get you as a reader. There isn't this point and edge of like, oh my goodness, like we're here to set out and completely turn your head on a nail. Millar, I think, goes the other way, and there are just a lot of points where I'm actually going to skip the next couple of pages because there are some spicy panels that I do not want to show to the audience. There are pages where I'm just like, wow, that situation cranked up to 15 million. And it often happens in this book. It's not by circumstance. I do think that there are plenty of books out there that do favor the shock value, but Mark Millar's Pages of the Authority is second to none in that point. But Mark is also joined by Frank Quitely. Frank Quitely and Mark collaborated on most of this book, with a couple of exceptions, because I think Frank does get quite a bit of reputation as, yes, he is one of my favorite artists of all time. He is a living legend, but I will admit that he was a little bit slow. So Chris Weston turns into fill-ins for the second arc of the book, or this specific volume, which is called Earth's Inferno. Or Earth Inferno, I should say. And you also have some other creators who fill in, tend in the gaps. One thing I actually really wish that these books had, more so for this book than the first one, because the first one, I think you could tell which pages were part of which issue, being designated, hey, this is part 1 of part 4, or this is the second arc, part 2 of part 4. In this book, we do jump around a little bit right after Quietly leaves, and I think because of that, we do need some issue denoters. Like this is, for example, one of the page breaks that I'm talking about in terms of the differences in how this book is structured and divided up. And while I do appreciate having the covers there, having some sort of note that says this is issue 21, or this is annual number 1, or this is part of the WILDSTORM special that's collected in this. And I should probably point out that this does collect that special, like I talked about, or stories in thereof, issues 13 through 29 of the Authority, and also the annual 2000 number 1. And why I tend to say that is because Tom Payer takes over from Mark Millar temporarily after the first part of Brave New World, which is the last arc that Mark Millar had a part of in this specific book. But that being said, Tom Payer and Dustin Gwen, who would also come back a little bit later and join Ed Brubaker, if my mind does recall those issues correctly that I read a while ago. Dustin Gwen and Tom Payer do this 4-issue arc called Transfer of Power, which also work for a specific... it's interesting because the brand new villains they have to face do not take in any authority as of late. And I do think this is where the focus does tend to shift a bit, because Tom Payer is not Mark Millar, And so reading some of those stories were not, I don't know, it just felt very different in tone. And I also do want to point out, like I said, with the shock value, I understand now why this book is labeled under the Black Label line. This is a more mature book by happenstance, and by mature, I mean not in terms of maybe, yeah, some of the subjects definitely are, but oh my goodness, there are words in here that I would not utter or even think about uttering to other people if I had even the chance to. Not only because I just don't say those words often, I don't think that people should be using them in broad daylight. And the same goes for a lot of the mutilations that happen in this specific book. But Arthur Adams does take over the last bits of this specific part of the Authority, which is the send-off from Mark Millar into a completely brand new era, where we are completely differentiated from the ideas that Hitch and Ellis set up. That being said, it's not like the universe is dead. We do still have the remnants of it. And of course, who doesn't like Midnighter and Apollo? Here is a look at some of the extras in this book. We have a pinup there. We've got a spread page. We got another pinup, this time by Cal Baker, which is pretty cool. Gene Ha, who doesn't love Gene Ha? Bruce Timm, Jose Ladrone. You've got a Jack Hawksmoor pinup by Matt Wagner. The Authority, Absolute Authority, Volume 2, and a Dr. pinup by the late, great Mike Waringo. Under New Management, Earth Inferno. Frank Quietly, unused covers. We got another cool Brian Hitch cover, and also a script. I just find these funny. And that, as they say, is that. Now, if you're looking for a chance to read The Authority before it ever gets adapted on screen, check out our sponsors.
If you're in Europe and you're interested in buying these books, definitely check out Walt's Comic Shop in Berlin, Germany. They have the cheapest pre-order prices, flat shipping rate of €12 for all EU countries, emails answered within 24 hours, waltscomicshop.com, and you can use the code nearmintcondition at checkout and get free shipping for all EU countries with your first order over €40. That's Walt's Comic Shop, your reliable source for omnis and premium collected editions in Europe. Ding!
CheapGraphicNovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget, the CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more.
And that is going to be it for me. I am Dom of X. Let me know down in the comments section below if you're going to be planning on picking up any one of these Authority complete collections. If you are a trade paperback reader, if you're waiting for the omnibus, or waiting for a new edition of the first Absolute, or even the second Absolute. That's it for me. I am Dom of X. Please stay safe, Minties, and have a great day wherever you are.